So this is week 69 on Wellness Wednesday, and today's talking about celebrating some of the insights or the achievements. It's some of the shifts that we've had in life, and so I just wanted to open that up for myself. I think the biggest realization is this idea that it's reframing what works for us. So what would you say? So I'll start with you, Matthew.
Ooh, I'd have to go back. How long? I started sweeping the floor of my dad's engineering workshop in 1984. And I quickly then got up to manager of the manufacturing because the other manager from Hungary got fired. So there was nobody else prepared to do it. But then I left that manufacturing side of the business and I went off into life science, thought to myself, how hard could that be? And I learned all that on my own. And then I came out of that with serious amounts of knowledge around computer systems and stuff like that. And then I thought, right, I'll try software and throw my hand at that. And I designed SaaS enterprise asset management software products for life science, really complex stuff. And now for my sins, I'm coaching and mentoring, looking for my first victims. Sorry, clients.
And what was the biggest um, shift of realization or the biggest area of growth for yourself that has an impact on what you do and how you do it?
I'd say the coaching and mentoring, the last one, because everything else was just like, okay, you have to do this now, you have to do this now, and you have to do this now. Whereas what I'm doing now, I made a conscious decision to leave the business that I was in for 37 years and just start off on my own and find my own way. I didn't even know what I was going to do. I just knew I didn't want to be in that business and it wasn't working for me anymore. And I had tried for about, I don't know, 5 or 10 years, but I was trying too hard to make something work. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if it doesn't feel right, like you have to put effort and work into everything. But if you don't get the feeling that when you leave at the end of the day that yeah, I've done something and I'm happy with it, that wasn't really there. So I found another CEO, stuck him into the software company, and I ran out the door as fast as my legs could take me with my central muscle pumping them out.
Well, I'm gonna come back to you because I want to Paul just led a skill, a coaching practice and skill sharing yesterday. And so the question will be when we come back around is, what method of coaching or what idea behind coaching do you find most hopeful? But we'll continue with you, Jan. What has been the most significant change or the most insightful thing that has come up for you that guides what you do or how you do it?
I think the biggest was my shift and reframe of emotions and what they are. Um, to actually welcome them, that they're a part of the human experience, to not label them as good or bad. Yeah, it's been life-changing, to kind of have that viewpoint and to be able to give a little bit of space around them, a little bit of distance at times, to be able to better reflect on what they are and what they're trying to tell me, what they're signaling to me. So that's probably been the biggest shift for me.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And how about for you, Paul? What has been the biggest insight or the biggest improvement that has framed or what you do or how you do it?
Gosh, I mean, there's so many things I think that we learn and experience on this journey. I mean, the one thing that comes to mind is, I mean, the go-to word self-awareness is that just constantly being aware of how my thoughts are influencing my reality and how my thoughts are, impacting on how I'm turning up at the moment and my experience. And I think the other thing that impacted for me a lot was just turning from extrinsic motivation to intrinsic motivation. It's like um, empowering myself and realizing that it lies within me. If I was to rely on others, I would lose my power, and I've done that. Um, and yeah, I those are some of the things that come up. But I think there's such a smorgasbord. I love that word, of things that that we learn as coaches, and so yeah, it's just constant. And I think the other thing that's come for me is I've realized that this love of learning that I have is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. I mean, I always thought to myself, why did it come to me not in my 20s, but later on? And then I realized it's always been there. I was always learning new things and loving to learn new things. And I think that's another thing. Sorry, you asked for one thing, but is that learning that it's a good thing to have a flexible mindset, a growth mindset. To have fixed ideas is is not a good thing. You get stuck in a belief. And if you're not willing to address that belief, how can you possibly help people? Anyway, some of the things that come up.
I love that. I think that's why we're all connected here and why we all show up, because I think we share a lot of the same journey and awareness. You talked about self-awareness, you talked about that external versus intrinsic shift, and all those things that we talk about, it's realizing that it's us, right? It's like this is our journey in life. And I think the best way we could be a coach is to be the best version of ourselves. If we're in that secure, best place, these ideas are rather simple, but to make that shift for somebody, you're battling with a lifelong habit of them being how they are, and so it's a little bit of a challenge. You have to be kind of creative to slowly bring this prize in front of them, and so until they stumble across it and see it, and then once they see it, then they can't not see it. So, how about for you, Truda? What has been the biggest either insight or the biggest improvement that has helped you either frame why you do what you do or how you do what you do?
Smorgasbord, I think, like Paul said. But a few things that, just a few sentences that stick with me is that you cannot control anybody else. You cannot tell them what to do. You can open the perspectives, and then it's up to them. So it's how you guide, how you speak, how you approach people. So it comes to your more or less personality. And personally, for me, it is the process of getting rid of what did I write here? Bitterness, revenge, and shame, and not even get rid of it, but to realize. And now we're going into parts work, right? To realize that all these things are parts of me, and then thinking, okay, so what positive do these things actually bring me? Because that brings you around to a whole different way of thinking, right? And when you take that across to a client, imagine what, I don't know, what a different sort of foundation they have when they think in this way. So yeah, among other things. Thank you.
It's quite beautiful, and that shame usually comes from this concept of self-judgment, right? It's like that critical thought loop that exists for people, and if you could help someone shift that, because it's my presupposition that we only have that because that we accept it to be true, and we allow it to exist, and it doesn't have to exist. We can actually stop it at will because it's our thought. and it's learning the process of actually stopping that shame loop or that judgment loop. And the moment that we do it, we just realize, oh, that's so much more peaceful. I actually had a coaching call the other day, and I said, I had something happen where my e-bike fell off of the back of my vehicle, and I had it wrapped in. I had a nice frame that was supposed to hold it and everything, but it just bounced out, and it got damaged. And it's like, and I thought, you know. I wish I would have had that critical voice telling me to latch it down harder or to do an extra strap or something. But then I realized that it would not have changed anything because um, it would have probably still happened, but the that critical voice would have been complaining about something else that needed to get done or something else I didn't do perfectly. And then as soon as that happened, it would give it a whole nother track to run on. And I was able to release that. So it's like it happened. It's like, okay, it's a shame that it happened. Accidents do happen. And then I just reframed it in a way that was helpful. So, it's finding a way to experience life in a way that's positive. So thank you for sharing that. Miriam, if you could put in the chat what comes to mind for you, what has been the biggest insight um or the biggest improvement in your experience or learning or any of those that has helped you find your why or how you show up for clients. And we'll move on to Arcadian. Arcadian, are you there? So how about for yourself? What's been the biggest improvement?
What was the question again, Steve?
It's what have you found to be either an insight or something that you've improved about yourself that has allowed you to be a better coach or to show up in a better way in the world?
You know, I appreciate every single one of you. At the age of 13, I was contracted to a group called Group 10. And in South Africa, it was quite challenging because you had apartheid, you had wars going on with Angola and Zimbabwe. I even still have my cap. Can you believe that? I found it today. It's a form of reiteration. But when you truly find a sense of knowing that your past does not define you, it's a miracle because we're all here to simply just be as a sunflower, live in daytime compartments and embrace a sense of tranquility, knowing that we do have a shadow, but it does not make us who we are. That's what it is for me, at least. And it's my feelings, and my feelings can't be wrong to me. Thank you, everyone, and I appreciate every single one of you.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I especially like that idea that, your experience is true. And this is something that I think that, especially like with boundary setting and everything else, it doesn't matter whether we're wrong or right. It's finding what works for us. And so, if you feel bad, if somebody does something and you feel bad, you still feel bad. It doesn't matter whether there's any basis, if there's any room for criticism of your own judgment, it's like you're still feeling bad. Now the question is, how can you become curious about feeling the way that you want to feel? So go ahead, Paul.
Stephen, I think that I'm putting it out there. Anybody that wants to collaborate with me on writing or delving into this topic of boundaries, but beyond just the definition that people put out there as creating a safe space, because I think boundaries can be toxic, and I'm exposed to that at the moment a lot. And I think they can be something that's used as a weapon and weaponized. But so anyway, without going to deep dive into that, whoever's wanting to really explore it. Like yesterday was great to ask those questions and really challenge our thoughts. And for me, that's how I want to approach boundaries, is really, yeah, is it really a safe thing, or is it just, what else can it be? We know that it's that, but what else can it turn up as?
So I want to contribute, and I'll expand. This is the book that I was an anthology. It's Beyond Boundaries, Thriving in Life's Gray Zone. And in my chapter in the book is the fact that I did not know how to set boundaries. I grew up in a family where there was an emotional enmeshment, there was codependency, there was all of these things that existed. And then also you layer on top of that being an emotional, being a sensitive soul with heightened response to emotion. And what comes from that is that, to me, one of the things that we can consider boundary setting to be is it's a skill development tool, right? It's like emotional intelligence. When we become aware. And so yes, I would love to be part of that journey with you. And I think it's very needed, because the people that struggle, they're ignoring their own boundaries, right? They don't. To me, a boundary is finding out when you'll feel bad, and then coming up with a framework that protects you from the feeling that you don't want to feel. There are valid boundaries that exist. So a valid boundary in my mind is when someone is either bullying or taking advantage of someone weaker, whether it be a child or a woman, especially a younger person, someone that is vulnerable. And so if that exists, then it triggers this protective response that I have. And I think that that's a valid boundary. I mean, some other people may argue like, no, it's not, that's not valid. But to me, it's 100% valid. And I think that, I support that. So I would have to set boundaries and say this can't happen. And if it does, there'll be some sort of consequence. So
I can participate as well, Paul. I can relate to it, but I won't go into too much detail. I'd be more interested also in identifying how to manage them in relation to the context you're talking about, Steve. Because anybody that I talk to specifically, and yeah, and you go on the 100% human calls often enough. Anybody that's upset or they have problems or they're feeling insecure, it's normally because somebody has walked into that toxic zone that you talk about, Steve. I think maybe you mentioned it as well a little bit, Paul. Knowing the boundaries of humanity, where to not go when you give a shit about somebody else's feelings, kind of thing. That's about as deep as I get.
I mean, I was just wondering, when do boundaries become a hindrance? That's what I would like to explore. Like, when are they used as a protective wall where there's almost, it becomes so harsh that it leads to isolation or disengagement. And it becomes this, as opposed to this wall, which might be a little bit more malleable or movable, it just becomes like solid, and the person is almost trapped, and they've trapped themselves, let's say, by creating their own boundaries of almost too much in the opposite direction.
Love that. That's exactly the thing I'm going for, is that boundaries are so diverse. And if you can imagine, we use the idea and words that we put out there and go, well, this is always falling in a healthy situation, a healthy mind. But what if that mind hasn't dealt with all the things they need to deal with to develop, but they come across this term boundary, and then I go, well, okay, I'm just going to put walls up because that way I don't. So what happens is they lose power intrinsically because they've created this extrinsic boundary, and there's no room for growth because, well, I don't have to do anything because I've got my boundaries up and I'm safe. But does that sometimes take away then from further development and introspection with going, well, that tough question so many people find difficult to answer. How did I contribute to this situation? What could I have done differently? And, so what you said, Jan. So you have an impenetrable fortress, and you're sitting on the inside, and you're also losing out on living in growth.
Right. No, absolutely, which is what I was referring to. It's like someone who gets hurt and then puts up a boundary, like against relationships, makes them feel isolated, more alone. They don't really look at that wall because it makes them feel safe, yet they still feel alone. And yet they're not willing to actually delve deeper to look at it because it's really challenging. So that boundary or that wall becomes this fortress that they actually put up around themselves.
So it poses the question, do you need boundaries before or after or during a time that you go through a treatment process? And then how do you affect those boundaries before, during, and after?
Right.
So I can't help but jump in. And to me, the idea is if you're wounded, right? So as we grow, when we're little, we have these boundaries, right? We put like with little kids, we put all these fences up and we create boundaries because we don't want them to get hurt. Well, we don't have those boundaries emotionally. And so a lot of times if we're not emotionally intelligent, if we don't have the skill set to deal with certain things, we will stumble into an area and we will actually feel an emotional pain. When you have an emotional pain and someone tramples in an area that triggers that emotional pain, it's going to feel bad. And so the what I've noticed is people will set very strict boundaries when they've been wounded. And then as they heal, right, as they grow past those boundaries will then flex and relax. The difficulty is when people willingly violate those boundaries, right? Because it's like, let's say they're in a relationship and somebody's constantly violating a boundary. Well, what do you do with that?
I mean, I think the other issue, Stephen, is it depends, I think, on how severe the trauma was that triggered that boundary or that triggered that
Yes,
wall. Because
exactly.
then, out of fear, somebody puts up a wall and it might be just fear of situations that are similar. And the person's like, okay, that wall goes up, and so depending on how severe the trauma is, that wall may be impermeable, you know.
The interesting thing about it is that, it's all about management. I think it came up in one of our Friday calls, Jan. I remember you
Uh-huh.
mentioning about it. And the ironic thing about it is that the toxic boundary situation that can kind of hurt people or not hurt people or whatever, it tends to be the receiver of the toxicity that is the person that wants to be fixed. But the giver of the toxicity doesn't really care. So the problem doesn't go away by fixing the receiver. You have to somehow try and fix the deliverer, the toxic post person. I got that right. I was going to say postman, but anyway.
What I found interesting is so that can be an extreme source of stress because if you expect someone to act in a way that's different than the way that they act, then now you've got a discrepancy between what is reality and what it is that you're expecting, and that causes the stress. The best thing that we can do is reframe it. And one of the ideas that comes forward is instead of viewing the person as being bad or being toxic, you can view them as unskilled. This came from Ken Caputo. If you think of somebody as unskilled, almost childlike in nature, then you can realize, okay, where can I grow from this? How can I be more mature in my response? And define, what works for you. Because when children act up, sometimes it's not pleasant, and it's like, you know, it can still be a difficult situation, but it doesn't affect us as much as when an adult does it. If an adult acts that way, sometimes we can actually get stuck in the loop. So, Sean, go ahead.
Here, I would say, like, I'm thinking of, I live in Guatemala and they build houses from cement. So when you decide to change it, it's a major undertaking. And I was thinking, I was aligning that with the boundary, like Jan was talking, this rigid fortress. Boundaries should be more like office cubicles. They're easy to take down and rearrange. Right? They should be static. They're not static. They're dynamic, they're situational. In that situation, Jan mention, yeah, for a period, I need to cut that person out. Or like Matthew was talking, that toxic person. No, you're out for now. But the other thing is to stop and reflect and like see the world, try to see the world through their lens, right? Have some empathy. And I know for me, you know, thinking about the highest positive intent, everybody is doing the best they can with whatever they have available. And it's not necessarily a bad intention. They're not trying to hurt. It changed my perspective a lot. But just taking a pause, accurately evaluate their view, their position, and like you said, Stephen, it's not black and white. There's a lot of gray.
And
Bad people aren't bad all the time. Good people aren't good all the time. Like, we can't say a good person never does something bad. That would be ridiculous. It's not true.
Sure, Sean, Stephen, and everyone here. May I intervene, please?
if Sean is finished, yes.
Yeah, Sean, you finished? There's a very big difference between why-based factors and what-based factors. Because why-based factors, when you internalize between your conscious, subconscious, and unconscious, your ID, it creates a sense of illusion based on past experiences and imagination. But when you adapt that, and especially with clients, this is very important. So when you close a loop in communicating with clients, and you close a loop so that their neurological pathways can form a bond to heal, in what-based aspects, it becomes a goal. And goals can be broken out into a vision and a dream and a manifestation. Unconditional positive regard, all that type of vibes.
I love that. I'll try to translate. You know, it's that simple idea that if you ask the question why, you might get a justified reason why you feel bad. And now you're stuck because you have the justified reason for feeling bad because the person violated something or did something that you deemed to be wrong. And you're still feeling bad and you have a justified reason to feel bad. Does that sum it up, Michael? So I appreciate, so we got a couple things that came in. Mary, before she left, shared that there were many things that helped her in her, you know, in the shift that she's had. More of having space for people and doing active listening. But she says it has to begin with her. I listen to my thoughts and I dwell only on those that I choose to, or otherwise I can let them go. One of the things that I really do all of you remember Ed Keating, when he would do the coaching practice, he'd always do this little thing. He would like take his own biases and thoughts and put them in a book, and then he would just imagine putting that book on the shelf, and then he would start off the coaching session with this practice of intentionally taking what his thoughts were, what his biases were, and setting them off to the side. I always like that practice because it symbolizes what, you know, a little skill that works when we're talking with people. And so that's what I wanted to go into next is, you know, we're talking about improvement and Paul had led us yesterday on how we can share our skills in coaching. So my question to you, and we'll start with you, Matthew, what is a skill or what is something that you found in coaching that you found to be either a favorite practice or a favorite skill, something that you like to go to on occasion?
Listening, I think, more, and being more kind of observant of the other person, particularly not just, I think, Paul, you might have touched on this at one point, it's not just in a coaching capacity or in a professional capacity, but also in a pre-4-point conversation with somebody. You know, I mean, before you've had 4 points and then you talk to anybody. And yeah, I think that and things like the Wheel of Life and force field analysis and tools that can scientifically get you thinking about something that's normally like seen as from people as being fluffy and emotional and girly and whatever shite excuse they use for not using it. But it gets people really thinking about, Jesus, I'm doing the wrong shit. I should be doing other stuff. And I'm giving a crap about the wrong things. Like my Wheel of Life is extended. It's a little Excel program, but it has how I rate the values or the categories, but also how important they are in my life or in the client's life. And I had a particularly challenging client that just didn't want to be fixed. And that's what he said to me when he started. How are you going to fix me? I said, I'm not going to fix you. That's up to you. I'll just guide you. But anyway, he was starting to realize that by looking at how he rated the certain values against how important they are in his life, and these are all graphed together, he was starting to realize, right, okay, something's not right here. Because what the problem this guy had was that he would say, yeah, I'll do that. And then he just wouldn't bother his ass and he wouldn't give a crap. So he'd let people down the whole time. And he was starting to kind of realize that that had affected friendships, that had affected his work and his family. And then the most important thing came out of that was how important his family is. And then in turn, how important it is for him to change. You know, now I was getting nowhere having a conversation with this guy, but when I jumped into looking at values and looking at the importance of values and aligning them, then this person started to open up a little bit. Now, he never came back to me, but only so much I can do.
Thank you for sharing that. How about for you, Jan? What have you found in your discussions, whether it be whatever area that you find that you talk to people and help them in a certain area. What have you found to be, I don't know, something that is like your go-to, something that you find has a meaningful impact on occasion?
I would say two things have been really is I think in general, well, I'll make this generalization that I think people are sensation oriented, or if they can feel something, it becomes an experience. It kind of lands home better. So offering people an experience of spaciousness, which allows them a moment to reflect, to go into that self-awareness. So that is, to me, vital. Because I think unless they allow, if they don't have that space, they can't see anything. Those walls are up and they don't have the ability to reflect and look inside. So getting, guiding people into that space has been hugely beneficial. And then I guess once they're in that space or within that, depending on what's going on, is to actually ask people to start, journaling or writing down what's going on and how they feel. Has been vital, because I think something about writing it is that, again, that tactile experience of getting it out on paper, seeing it. I think you get a little perspective, and then you start to see, possible patterns or, things like that, which sometimes are not obvious to us unless we actually start to look down and say, oh, okay, 6 times this happened or whatever it is. So those would probably be the two most profound practices.
No, thank you for sharing that. And also I hear people when they look back, they'll be in the emotion and they're journaling it, and then they look back at the end of the week and they thought, well, wait a minute.
I've done that over years. We'll look back at a journal and I'm like, oh my gosh, I wrote about this, like 5 years ago,
I love that. So how about for you, Paul? You know, what's an idea related to coaching or something that you found to be most helpful in helping people either grow or to shift their human experience?
I just made note your four things, practices, habits, helping people um, define habits that empower them on a daily basis. So that makes everything else easier to deal with. So if they are able to do that, they can turn up mentally stronger, but they have to practice those daily. Um, then I'm genuinely interested. And I think that comes across, especially when I'm one-on-one with somebody in a conversation. I'm, sometimes I'm probably too probing, but I ask questions because I'm truly interested in hearing what they're saying, and figuring out how what they're saying can drive them forward or is it holding them back? And do they realize, you know, can they decide? And in that's the best practices, conversations, questions, and interests. I mean, those are the things that have worked for the people that I work with and myself. So yeah.
I appreciate that. How about Truda? How about for yourself? What works when you're dealing with clients? What coaching practices seem to either have been most effective for you or things that you think have a big influence on people on occasion? So it's this idea that it's not always the thing that you go to, but it's something that you find to be really interesting or helpful.
I think, like Jan said, building up the space, setting the room for this conversation. So the way I do that is that I clarify very early on that there is no judgment and I don't believe in shame. That's one thing. And then then you build trust and you build the openness and all that stuff. But what I find has come up a lot of times is that I point out people's strengths and they just don't realize they have them. They have no clue. So when I point to it, and this is what you said, do you realize what that means? That means that they go just like, and that's amazing. I thought that's one of the things that I've sort of, remember. Thank you.
And Michael, how about for yourself? What coaching tool or practice have you found either most helpful for yourself or with your clients? You're muted, my friend.
I've been waiting for this because every coach has over the 40. So when it comes to process strategies, and we're here to learn as a community, and all I heard was me, myself, I in today's session, opposed to being empathic and a sense of a true sense of being socially aware of clients, understanding so they can reprint past experiences to develop a new neurological pathway to be the best of their rest. And it's so important because without having a ability to be not unconstructive, but to allow them to flow with their own mannerisms in the sessions. So asking them, hey, how are you? And letting them lead the sessions allows them to become a better version of themselves. Thank you, everyone.
Sorry,
Hello.
sorry, I had a sneeze there. Um, thank you for sharing that. And for myself, I loved what everyone shared. I think it's a thread that kind of focuses in on my coaching experiences as well. And not only is it finding what works for the client, it's being curious because it doesn't matter what I think works. And that's kind of the general message that I always kind of roll back to. There's things that we talk about like rapport, but I've had clients before when I said, "How are you?" They just like they got offended. It's like, don't ask me that question. You know, let's do this coaching, right? Let's do this session. And it's like an instant separation, right? And it's like you feel like the person's very resistive and very directive, and they it was the same it was the same session that I had, same day that I had another person come and say that you're causing me anxiety. And I don't, it was soon after that first one. And what I realized is that um it's this idea that when someone has this belief that someone else can be the influence or to be the trigger for their emotions, it's something to explore. And we actually had a very valuable session in saying, okay, well, now that we know what causes it, let's consider the intention.
I know,
How
I
do you
know, right, Steve? Yeah. So, we face our own internal fears and coaching and validating ourselves, trying to be either a placeholder or placeholder, and evolve to actually be a place in wellness to allow people to choose their own life path, their own neurological pathway.
Exactly. And what it turned out for this client is that they were needing a little bit of sense of security, a little bit of sense of control, and that was the way that they expressed it. And so, you end up having a good session afterwards. So what I've learned is if you can find the beliefs that a person is holding, and then just slowly over time move those into, okay, what experience was the foundation for that? And if you can actually connect them to an experience where, and a lot of times it happens at a very young age. Like I could tell you a story. Somebody was skating and their biggest sense of accomplishment, right? The coaching session was around feelings of failure, not doing the right thing, listening to others, making mistakes, losing money in businesses or selling businesses before they were, before they were multi-million dollar businesses. And even though they made money and were successful, they always had this feeling of loss. Well, what was interesting about this is that when they were very young, they actually had a memory of skating, and they became a hockey player and quite good at skating. But the first time they skated, they could not skate around the rink once. And then, they would hit a patch of ice that was rough or a bad spot in the ice, and they would fall down. But over time, they learned that they could see the areas where where the ice was rough or a gouge in the ice where it would cause them to fall down, and they would avoid those things. And eventually, one of the biggest moments in their life was, at age 3, to be able to skate around the rink once. And the feeling of accomplishment, that feeling of exhilaration was so powerful, but there was a sense of freedom that came along with that. And once we helped them rediscover that sense of freedom, that experience, that was actually the key to bringing that back into their life. And now they could, as an adult, they can go back on this quest to find, okay, what activities, what things do I do that bring this sense of freedom to me? So it's their own feeling, it's their own realization, but it's a bedrock truth mounted, it's hard coded into the base of their experience, and it can be so meaningful for people. And so that's what I love. Just like you had mentioned, Truda, it's this idea of helping people realize, let's not worry about what you can't do. Let's not worry about what is wrong. Let's find out what's right. Let's focus in on that. And I really think that that's helpful for people. So, all right. So we've got about 10 minutes left. Go ahead, Matthew.
Sorry, I've been actively listening instead of butting in, which I would have done a few years ago. I don't know how applicable it is to the conversation we're having, but you specifically asked me about coaching and parts in coaching, but the most impactful part of my life would have been my 18 years running an engineering company that was in the family business. And when I decided to shut that business down, I still owned the warehouse, but I just sold all the machinery, went off as a consultant, and I kept one job back that was basically laser cut steel that had to be put into a bracket for the local gas company, sliding steel supports, that kind of stuff. So I just needed somebody to weld it up because I had sold all my MIG welders as well, feckin' idiot that I am. And I got somebody to come in and, or somebody came in to try and sell me something from the local tool supplier. And I said, look, I'm looking for a partner to work with me to put these together. I know 3 friends that have set up engineering businesses, but I don't want to put them into competition. Now, bear in mind, I'm sitting in a 16,000 square foot workshop, empty of all the machinery, and the guy turns around and he said, I know lots of people, but not that work to the high quality you do. And I'm looking around going, shit, how do I get all this stuff back? But the point was, that was the most impactful part of my life. And I learned the most life skills as well with engineering practice. And like, people don't think enough about how important a trade is for you. There's something on the radio there yesterday, I think it was, about life skills, changing the fuse on a plug. Fixing something, taking something apart, putting it back together.
So, this is a discussion I was having with Roland on Monday, and I think we have a hard-coded need to be of value, right? We talk about it in my hypnotherapy training class. We talk about the need as a person to be helpful, and sometimes that need to be helpful is not helpful, especially when you have the answer, right? If you have the answer for somebody and it's like it's not their answer, now you're being more forceful, more invasive. But on occasion it's a very good thing to need to be helpful, because sometimes you are helpful and it feels good. But the idea that I think it's hard coded into our biology of, you know we're a social construct of beings, and this idea is that we want to have value within this tribe, within this group, and so that way we're not discarded, we're protected, we're fed, we're part of the security, and and I think that still exists within us. We all want to feel good about what we do, and when somebody helps us in a way that we feel good about what we do or what we've contributed, it's a pleasant experience. It's a good sense. So it that's something that is a space for awareness and growth, and it's realizing, okay, how can we have that sense of connection, of value, but actually create it internally, and then help others develop their own sense of value and self-worth and things like that. So I wanted to jump into the takeaways. So um, before we do the takeaways, can we just do like a one word, like if you were to give a focus for people today, Paul, what would be something that they could focus on that might be to help them have a little bit better experience in their life?
Well, it's well, one thing is the things you can be grateful for. The gratitude practice improves wellness feeling by 25%. So yeah,
I love
gratitude.
that. So gratitude. How about for you, Matthew? What is one word that somebody could focus on today that might be helpful for their life?
I'm gonna copy Paul. um, I'm gonna say grateful rather than gratitude. So it's a slightly different word. It means slightly the same thing, but it's kind of not looking into the past but being grateful for being able to do something different today. Maybe I didn't do it yesterday, but I did it today, or the opportunity to be able to carve out something ahead of you rather than worry about what's behind.
Thank you for that. And how about for you, Truda? What's one word that could help someone have a little bit better experience?
I have two letters that represent two words, and I've had them for years. It's awareness and acceptance.
That's lovely. How about for you, Jan? What is one word or two words that that might be helpful for another?
Well, we'll call it two in a little bit of a word. So it's the power of the pause. Well, power of the pause.
I love that. And Michael, how about for yourself? What's a word that comes to mind that people might focus on?
Can I do oxymoron?
Whatever you like.
Ice cream. So it's cold and something that's really nice, because I had diabetes and I like ice cream. So ice cream.
So that is your answer. That is your answer for everything. And for myself, the one word focus is it's trust yourself, right? That's it. So let's go into the takeaways. Jan, what was your takeaway from today? Does anybody need to leave, by the way, in 4 minutes? All right. So Jan, what was your takeaway?
I think I love what Trude shared about showing people what they have that's positive, like what strengths they have. And I really think that that's really powerful, because I think people get caught in stuff and ignore, their gifts and what they have. So I really liked that.
Yeah, yeah, I really appreciate that. And also, they all have the skills to achieve what it is they want to achieve. How about for you, Paul? What was your takeaway?
I'm going to take the easy way route and out and take the easy way out and say that everybody shared amazing things. I mean, that is so. Yeah, my takeaway is this is a good room to sit and absorb goodness in.
Thank you for that. And Matthew, how about for yourself? What was your takeaway from today?
My takeaway was the looking forward, but Jan just reminded me of a joke, if you don't mind, if you'll indulge me.
Go ahead.
So a grizzly bear walks into a bar and he goes up to the barman and he said, "Can I have a pint?" And the barman said, "Why the big pause?" Ka-ching. Topical, I think.
It's why the big pause?
Truda, your face is so funny. He's like, what?
All right, I shouldn't join in, but it's like so two men walked into a bar. You would have thought the second one would have seen it. All right, all right, Tudor. What was your takeaway from today?
The jokes are just bypassing me big time. Okay, my takeaway, the smorgasbord of what we know and how good it is to hear other people putting different words on the same idea. So the perspectives, I think that was my takeaway today.
And Michael, how about for yourself? What was your takeaway from today?
That we all have to grow in a sense of wellness, and it doesn't matter on the Freudian nor Ericssonian nor any other modalities that we have studied, but truly to be our authentic self. That's my takeaway. And it's very easily said than done to truly be in a mindset of unconditional positive regard, without ego, without being an egotist, without trying to validate one's own self-worth on visual screens, but truly just being here as ourselves to guide people with unconditional positive regard.
I love that.
Thank you.
And for myself, my takeaway is it's almost as though everything that everyone has shared are things that I hold deeply within my core of truths, of practices, of ways to engage others, ways to be helpful. And it creates this mesh. It's a very secure place of knowing, of being, that is not only helpful for ourselves, but can be very helpful for others. And part of this is this unconditional positive regard that was mentioned. It's respecting people wherever they're at without judgment, and it's helping them uncover what is helpful for them. And so thank you all. The biggest thing that I guess I've experienced in life is that by talking about these things, by going through them, not only do we normalize the difficulties, but we share the celebrations, we share the things where we're growing, and it kind of reinforces this understanding in a broader depth. And so, it's the simple things I think that have the greatest impact. And we've kind of touched on that today. So thank you all for being here.
You take a picture?
Oh, I did not. So if we can wait for Sean to come on camera, we'll get him on camera. And I wanted to see if Sean could. All right, I'm gonna take the picture here. Everybody smile. Oops, I gotta turn off my chat. All right, everybody smile or make a funny face. Sean, what was your takeaway from today? So so what word of wisdom would you like to impart with those listening or to us?
That we should not shy away from boundaries, but that we should approach them wisely and reflectively.
Thank you for that. And so anyone that sees this replay that would like to collaborate on the boundary project with Paul, as long as this replay has not exceeded the timing of the production of that work, the message in the comments, and we will get back to you. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Ciao.
Together.